All right, welcome everyone. I know you're all here to really grasp complex topics and fast, right, without feeling totally overwhelmed. So today we're taking a deep dive into something pretty mind-blowing, even for me. We're going to explore how to train AI, not just to process info, but to actually reason better, think more critically and align with, well, human values, all through conversation.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. We're looking at training AI models using what's called dialogic alignment. And that draws on the principles of street epistemology, which we'll talk more about, all within, get this, a constitutional AI framework. So basically, picture teaching AI to think more carefully, more like how humans ideally should, through conversations and discussions guided by some solid ethical ground rules.
Okay, now that is a huge challenge, I could already tell. So for this deep dive, our sources include this super detailed analysis that covers all the technical nitty-gritty, how you'd actually train an AI to do this, how you know if it's even working, and then the really wild part, some actual real-world uses that they're looking at. So our mission today, to pull out the key insights, the whoa, didn't see that coming moments about how this all works and why it matters so much. So street epistemology and AI, right? What even is that? At its core, how do you even begin to get an AI to do something that, to me, sounds incredibly human?
Right. So street epistemology, to put it simply, it's this method of conversation where you use really specific questions, kind of similar to that whole Socratic questioning thing, to help someone really examine why they believe what they believe. So the tough part is, how do you take that, which is such a human interaction, and translate it so an AI can not only understand it, but actually do it? And our source material, it points out several pretty major changes to how we design AI that researchers are exploring to make this whole thing actually possible.
Okay, I'm hooked already. Let's get into those changes. What's the first big one?
The first one they highlight is what they call explicit belief representation. Imagine, if you will, an AI that doesn't just process info, but actively stores and keeps track of what it believes to be true, along with how confident it is in each belief. So instead of just spitting out an answer, it might internally be thinking, okay, belief, water is wet, confidence level, 98%. You see, that's wild. And the idea is that this lets the AI actually reason about its own knowledge, which is crazy.
All right, so the AI's got this internal record of its beliefs and how sure it is about each one. How would that, practically speaking, how would you even build that into an AI?
Right. Good question. The analysis suggests different ways to do it, like using knowledge graphs or having dedicated memory slots, or even more abstract hidden patterns within the AI's massive network. And these can all be used to represent, how confident it is. The main point, though, is that the AI can actually access these beliefs, pull up this info during a conversation. So if some topic comes up, it can check, okay, what do I think I know about this and how sure am I?
Okay, so it's like giving the AI a way to know what it knows, how well it knows it. I get that. The source mentions that. Right now, it's actually really tricky to even define what a belief is inside one of these large language models. So how does making beliefs explicit solve that?
It's a great point. So right now, how a language model knows something is spread out across tons and tons of connections. But making beliefs explicit, it forces us to pinpoint and structure specific bits of information. That way, the AI can not only access that info, but actually talk about it, including how certain it is.
That is fascinating. It's going from this vague sense of knowing to a concrete, this is what I think I know. Okay,
Yeah.
So the AI is aware of what it thinks it knows and how well. What's the next ingredient you need to make this reasoning AI?
Okay, next up is something they call uncertainty quantification. You know how humans, we often express doubt, I think so, or maybe. Well, our source points out this interesting thing. Current AI, these large language models, they tend to be way too confident. Even when they're totally wrong, they sound sure of themselves. And this seems to be partly because of the way they're trained, often being rewarded for giving answers that sound confident, regardless of accuracy.
That's a problem, right? Confidently
y'all
wrong,
know
like you
that.
said.
Yeah.
So how do you even begin to teach an AI to say, I don't know, or I'm not sure?
That's the challenge. So the goal here is to build in a component that actually figures out how uncertain the AI is about its answer, like a separate part of the model that generates a probability or confidence score. Then the AI would use that score to decide, okay, should I hedge my bets here? Should I express doubt? Should I even ask for more information before I answer? And then training itself plays a huge role too. You got to encourage the AI to use those uncertainty markers, get it comfortable saying things like, maybe, I suspect, I'm X% confident, that kind of thing.
So instead of a straight-up answer, it might be like, based on what I know, I'm about 70% confident that.
Yeah, that's definitely more realistic. And probably more useful too. So, what's the next piece of this puzzle? We've got the AI knowing what it thinks it knows and admitting when it's unsure. What else?
The next big piece is what they call reasoning transparency, and it often comes through something called chain of thought. See, if street epistemology is about asking why, the AI has got to be able to show its why as well.
Like, show your work in math class. I remember those days. Not fondly. Exactly. So, chain of thought prompting, it's like encouraging the AI to lay out all the steps it took in its thinking process before it gives you the final answer. So rather than just, boom, here's the answer, it might first list out, what evidence it looked at, different possibilities it considered, or even questions it asked itself along the way. The key here isn't just getting an answer, but understanding how the AI got there, right? Which is, I think we can all agree, super crucial for trust, especially with AI.
You mentioned the AI asking itself questions, and that just blows my mind. That's like built-in error detection, right? How does that even work?
Yeah, it is. There's a couple of ways this can happen. One way is the AI basically has this internal dialogue with itself. It's asking itself questions, coming up with answers, then based on that answer, asking another follow-up, and so on. Another way is using what they call multi-agent systems, where you have different AI agents working together. One of them is specifically the Socratic questioner, and its job is to probe the reasoning of another agent, the reasoner. And get this, the source points out that when these AI agents are allowed to freely question each other, they actually show better analytical thinking.
Wow, AI having its own internal debate. That's incredible. And that self-dialogue thing where the AI questions its own answers, it seems like that's got to be a powerful way to catch those errors and biases.
Oh, absolutely. And this leads right into the next architectural feature, which is called epistemic reflection mechanisms. It's like now the AI takes a step back and actually reviews its own conclusions.
Like a mental checkup.
Exactly. After it comes up with an answer, it kind of pauses and asks itself, hold on, how did I get here? What assumptions am I making? How sure am I about this? The source actually draws a parallel here to what's called constitutional AI, where the AI critiques its own outputs based on a set of principles. In this case, the principles would be focused on good thinking habits.
So the AI has its own internal checklist for quality reasoning.
Yeah, that's the idea. And it uses these epistemic reflection prompts. Those are questions like, does this answer consider any uncertainties, or what might I be missing here? And these questions guide its self-critique. If it finds a flaw, it goes back and revises. The result is that a single answer becomes like the product of this whole internal dialogue, leading to hopefully more reasoned and explainable responses.
I'm telling you, this is blowing my mind. And AI actually reflecting on its own thought process. This is getting deep quickly. So what's the next step in building the super reasoner AI?
All right, so the next crucial ability is what they call dynamic belief updating. Think about it. We're constantly getting new information, right? And a good thinker, they've got to adjust their beliefs based on that new info. So essentially, the AI needs to be a learner just like we are.
So the AI shouldn't just stick with its first answer no matter what, especially if new evidence comes up.
Exactly. So the AI's belief module, the thing we were talking about earlier, it's got to be updatable in real time, right there in the middle of a conversation. So if a user gives a really strong counter argument or presents some new reliable information, the AI should be able to revise what it thinks, maybe even lower its confidence in a view it held before.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
How would that work in practice? I mean, practically speaking.
Well, the source suggests a few ways to handle it. It could be as simple as a system that remembers any new info throughout the conversation and adjusts the AI's confidence accordingly. Or maybe something more complex, like an algorithm that directly modifies the AI's internal representation of its beliefs. There are different technical ways to do it, but the core idea is that its beliefs aren't set in stone. The AI should be open to changing its mind when the evidence calls for it, just like, a thoughtful human would.
So let me just recap the technical side here for a second. We've got an AI that stores its beliefs explicitly with these confidence scores, expresses its uncertainty, shows its reasoning process step by step, like showing its work, reflects on its own thinking using principles of good reasoning, and it updates its beliefs as needed. Wow, that's a lot. How do you actually build all of that using the AI tech we have today?
Yeah, that's the question, right? The analysis suggests that all of this could actually be added on top of the transformer models that are like the backbone of a lot of today's AI systems. For example, you could have a separate record of the AI's beliefs and confidence levels that the model can access at every step of the conversation. So the model's output, it wouldn't just be its reply in the conversation, but also any updates to this belief record. And then there are things like reinforcement learning, which we'll talk about, which can help make sure that AI is good at keeping track of its beliefs and expressing, accurate levels of confidence.
And the source really hammers home this point that combining chain of thought reasoning with that self-questioning process, that's essential for making the AI's reasoning clear to us, to humans, which is obviously vital if we want it to align with our values and, for catching any mistakes it might make.
Absolutely. If we can see how the AI got to an answer, we can better understand its thought process and spot any flaws or biases that might be hiding in there. That transparency is key if we're talking about building trustworthy and reliable AI. Can't skip that step.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good idea of how this epistemic AI, if that's what we're calling it, how it might be structured. But how do you teach it to actually reason this way? What kind of training do you need?
All right, so this is where things get even more interesting. To train an AI for epistemic reasoning, it takes a lot more than just your standard question-answer pairs. You need specialized training data and techniques that specifically encourage the AI to think out loud and question those assumptions it's making.
All right, so what kind of training data are we talking about here?
Well, the source highlights several key types of data. First, there's something called Socratic dialogue transcripts. Imagine feeding the AI tons of transcripts of real conversations between humans where someone is skillfully using Socratic questioning or that street epistemology we talked about to explore someone else's beliefs. That way, the AI can start to pick up on the tone, the structure of the questions, and how to guide someone to reflect without forcing its own opinions on them.
So it's like the AI is learning by example, observing how humans do it well.
Precisely. It learns to ask those questions like, what makes you think that? Or how sure are you about this? And it does it without being pushy or judgmental. Then you've got another type of data called annotated reasoning steps. This is using data sets where problems are solved step by step with clear notes about the level of uncertainty at each stage. So in a logic puzzle, the AI might see. Step 1, apply rule A, high certainty. Step 2, infer B, moderate certainty due to ambiguity in the rule. Conclusion, answer C, something like that.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. You're teaching the AI not just to solve the problem, but to also be aware of its own certainty at each step. Don't be a bullheaded viewer. Subscribe and stay in the loop. It's are they calling their non-subscribers stubborn?
A little bit.
They're you better get on board.
Join the herd. Or you're just a bullheaded, identity out there.
So what other kinds of data are important here?
Okay, so another really important one is what they call counter-argument and refutation dialogues. Basically, data that comes from debates or fact-checking contexts. This can help the AI learn how to update its beliefs when new evidence comes up. It learns to evaluate claims, consider both supporting and opposing arguments, and then, adjust its own position. And get this, the source even talks about changing some data sets so that they actually reward the AI for saying, I don't know, when it genuinely doesn't have enough information.
Wow. Reward the AI for admitting it doesn't know. That is smart. Avoids that whole overconfidence issue. What else do you need to feed into the training?
High-quality instruction tuning data is another big one. So this involves taking existing data sets that are already set up for training AI to follow instructions, but then you tweak the prompts to specifically focus on those epistemic tasks. So for example, instead of just asking the AI, what is the capital of France, you might ask it to respond by asking the user why they think Paris is the capital to get at their reasoning. The source actually highlights a study where they did this. They had a chatbot that was trained to be a street epistemologist, and it was surprisingly effective at getting people to reflect on their beliefs just by asking simple questions. We'd want to include lots of examples like that in the training data.
That is so cool. The AI is not just an answer giver, but a guide almost.
Yeah.
Helping the user think critically about their own beliefs. Okay, so the last thing the source mentions for training data is using constitutional principles and synthetic data. How does that fit into all of this?
Right. So if we're using a constitutional AI framework, which is one way to do all of this, We can actually create like artificial examples of dialogues that follow good reasoning principles. We can use a basic language model to generate conversations with both good and bad reasoning, then use those constitutional principles, which are basically rules for good thinking, to label the examples or even revise them. This gives us a training data set where the AI can see very clearly what good reasoning should look like.
Ah, so it's like showing the AI examples and being like, see, this is how you reason well. Okay, I'm getting it.
Yeah.
Now, beyond the data itself, how do you get the AI to actually learn from all this?
This is where something called reinforcement learning comes in. You have to define what counts as good epistemic reasoning. Then you reward the AI when it does those things. It's kind of like training a dog, but with way more complex rewards.
But how do you even begin to define rewards for something as subtle and complex as good reasoning? That sounds hard.
Yeah, it's a challenge. There's several ways to go about it. One is what they call reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF for short. So this involves having humans, actual people, evaluate the AI's dialogue based on things like, is the reasoning correct and clear? How well does the AI handle uncertainty? Is it actually helpful? And we'd specifically train these evaluators to look for those good thinking habits, like give higher scores to AI responses that ask relevant follow-up questions or that clearly state the assumptions they're making.
So basically you have humans teaching the AI what good reasoning looks like by giving it feedback.
Exactly. But getting feedback from humans all the time, it can take a lot of time and resources, right? So another option is to use what they call AI-based reward models. This means you train another AI, a separate one, to automatically judge the quality of the reasoning in the first AI's responses. And you give this evaluator AI-specific instructions on what good reasoning looks like. Like, you might tell it to check if the AI correctly identified what it knows and doesn't know, and whether its conclusions actually follow logically from the evidence.
Whoa, AI evaluating other AI's reasoning. That's a trip. It's like a feedback loop on top of a feedback loop.
Yep.
Okay, what other reinforcement learning methods are being used here?
Another cool method is constitutional AI fine-tuning, which uses AI feedback. So instead of just relying on humans, you use that set of constitutional principles, the rules for good thinking we talked about earlier, and you have the AI use those to critique itself. So imagine the AI comes up with a response, and then it uses those principles to be like, is this really a good answer? Am I following the rules here? And then it revises its own response based on that. It's this whole self-improvement cycle, which is pretty neat.
That's amazing. It's like the AI has an inner critic, always double-checking that its reasoning is top-notch. Okay, so how do you teach the AI to be more accurate about like how uncertain it is? You mentioned that earlier, but how does that work in the training?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's where reward design for uncertainty calibration comes in. You can actually reward the AI for giving confidence levels that match how often its statements turn out to be true. So, for instance, if the AI says it's 90% sure about something, it better be right about 90% of the time when it makes statements like that. And there are metrics you can use to measure this, so you can give the AI feedback, even penalize it if it's being too confident or not confident enough. This helps the AI learn to be honest about what it knows and what it doesn't know.
So it's like teaching the AI to be humble, which, let's face it, some humans could use a lesson in. The last thing the source mentions is self-play and adversarial training. What's that about?
This is a really interesting technique. Basically, you let the AI practice its street epistemology skills, like we talked about, but it does it by talking to itself or by responding to simulated users that might have, like, deliberately questionable beliefs. You could even have two copies of the AI interact. One is the questioner and the other is the believer. And then a reward model would evaluate if the questioner AI was doing a good job at prompting reflection in the other AI without, like, being too aggressive or dismissive. This helps the AI get better at having these conversations and responding appropriately in different situations.
So it's like the AI is having a sparring match with itself to hone its skills. I love it. This whole training process sounds so incredibly involved. You've got carefully chosen data, all these reinforcement learning techniques, even AI judging other AI. How do you make sure all of this actually leads to better reasoning in the end?
That's the key question. That's where the feedback loops and iterative refinement come in. This isn't just a one-time thing. You need to build in ways for the AI to constantly learn and improve as it goes.
Okay, so what kind of feedback loops are we talking about?
One thing is something they call reflection during training. You actually build in mechanisms so that the AI periodically, stops and analyzes its own performance, like summarizing its errors, its uncertainties, and even suggesting how it could do better. Some research shows that large language models can do this. They can refine their outputs just by reflecting on their past performance. And we can use those same ideas here to help the AI improve its reasoning habits.
So the AI is not just learning from the data we feed it, but also learning from its own mistakes, which, again, is a skill some humans could work on. What other feedback mechanisms are there?
Oh, real-world testing for sure. What they call human-in-the-loop dialogues. Even after that initial training, it's so important to have real people interact with the AI and then analyze those conversations. That can reveal weaknesses and point you towards, what needs more training. For example, you might find that the AI isn't very good at handling users who are really resistant to questioning. And then boom, you've got new info to refine the training process.
So real-world testing, yeah, essential. You get that feedback from actual users, which is invaluable. What else?
Another important thing is monitoring for alignment drift. As you're pushing the AI to be more and more rigorous in its reasoning, there's a chance it might start to conflict with, user satisfaction. You've got to watch out for that balance. If the AI is constantly grilling users with questions, they're going to get annoyed. So you might need to tweak the reward system or add more training data to help the AI be more sensitive to the context of the conversation.
Right. Make it a good reasoner, but don't make it annoying. That's a fine line to walk. Be the cream of the crop. Join our subscriber list today.
Okay.
I
like that.
And the last thing the source mentions is safety checks via dialogue constraints. What are those all about?
So this is all about making sure the AI's questioning doesn't accidentally cause harm. Imagine an AI that's so gung-ho about questioning everything. It might accidentally undermine well-established facts or even, give credibility to misinformation by treating it too seriously. So you need to put in some guardrails, rules or restrictions against asking questions that just create unnecessary doubt in things we know are true. The AI's got to learn when deep questioning is appropriate and when it's not. Context matters.
So it's teach the AI to be skeptical, but not too skeptical. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This whole explanation of the training process just shows how incredibly complex it is to build an AI that can actually reason well. It's not just about how it's structured, but about the data, the reward systems, the feedback loops. It's all got to work together to guide its learning. Mind-blowing.
It really is. It's a whole symphony of different components working together. And after all that work, building it, training it, the big question is, how do you even know if it's working? How do you measure if the AI is actually succeeding at this whole reasoning thing?
Right, that's the thing. Your standard accuracy tests, they just don't cut it here. You need to get at something deeper, the quality of the reasoning, if it's really reflecting, and whether it's actually aligned with our goals.
The source, it gets into a bunch of ways to measure this. One key area is what they call measuring epistemic reasoning quality. It's about looking at the how behind the AI's answers, not just the what.
Okay, so how do you evaluate the how part? That sounds tricky.
One way is something called chain of thought evaluation. If the AI is giving you that step-by-step explanation of its reasoning, you can actually assess how logical it is, if it's complete, and if the individual steps are accurate. And you can do this using guidelines, either with humans reviewing it or even with some automated systems to help out.
So you can actually have systems that help judge how well the AI is reasoning.
That's wild. What else can you measure? Uncertainty calibration is another big one. We want the AI to be honest about its confidence levels, right? So we can actually measure how well its stated probabilities line up with how often it's actually correct. There are specific metrics for that. And you can also track how often the AI is appropriately expressing uncertainty, saying things like, I don't know when it should.
Yeah, that makes sense. A good reasoner knows their limits. What about, the depth and breadth of the AI's reasoning? Can you measure that?
You can try. They call it epistemic diversity and depth. So for a complex question, you could see how many different perspectives the AI actually considers. A more thorough reasoning process should be exploring a lot of different angles. You could even develop a score that combines all these different aspects of good reasoning. How valid is the logic? Is the explanation clear? How well does it handle uncertainty? How thorough is it?
So it's like a report card for the AI's reasoning skills.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
But, the ultimate test, I guess, would be actual humans judging it, right?
Right. Definitely. Human panel evaluations, you can't beat them. Get a bunch of people, maybe even experts in the field, to read transcripts of conversations with the AI and rate how reasoned its contributions are. Human judgment can pick up on those subtle things, like the tone of the AI's questioning, whether it seems like it actually understands the evidence.
Right, it's like a Turing test, but for reasoning.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got ways to figure out if the AI's reasoning is good, but what about making sure it's aligned with our goals, and if it can actually have a helpful conversation?
That's another key area, what they call benchmarks for alignment and dialogic ability. If you've got an AI that's operating under a set of principles, those constitutional rules, you can test it against those rules by giving it different prompts and putting it in different situations, especially tricky ones.
So like a stress test for the AI's reasoning and alignment. I like that.
Exactly. And you can also test if it can facilitate those kinds of conversations where values are being explored. Like, you could simulate conversations about tough choices and see if the AI helps the user to, understand their own values better rather than just giving an answer. You could even try to measure if the user actually comes away with a better understanding of themselves.
That's powerful. It's like the AI is a therapist, in a way, helping us understand ourselves better. What other benchmarks are useful here?
Well, you can use existing benchmarks from, the field of AI ethics and safety. There's a bunch of those out there. And since we're dealing with a dialogue system here, you got to test how natural and engaging the AI is in conversation, right? Can it actually hold a conversation that makes sense? Does it ask good, relevant questions? You could even have humans rate the quality of the questions the AI is asking.
So it's not just about being right, but about being a good conversationalist. I get that. Now, the source raises a really interesting and kind of scary point. How do you know the AI isn't just faking it? How do you make sure it's actually reasoning and not just pretending to?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question. You got to make sure the AI isn't just putting on a show. The source calls this verifying genuine epistemic reflection versus simulation, and they give a bunch of strategies for doing that.
Okay, lay them on me. How do you tell if the AI is actually thinking or just mimicking thought?
One thing is to, run tests where you change the conditions. Maybe you don't explicitly tell the AI to be reflective, or you give it topics that are totally outside of what it's been trained on. See if it still shows those reasoning behaviors.
So basically trying to trip it up and see if it's really got the skills.
Yeah. And another tactic is to do things during the conversation that the AI isn't expecting, like suddenly agreeing with a point it made. If it's genuinely reasoning, it should be able to adapt, but a simulated reasoner might just get confused. And you can also test for consistency. Asks the same question in different ways at different times.
Right. A true reasoner should arrive at the same conclusion unless there's new information, right? It shouldn't contradict itself for no reason. What else can you do?
You can also look closely at what they call the reasoning praise, the step-by-step explanation. If it's all just generic phrases or rewording the question back to you, it might be faking it. Genuine reasoning should have substance to it.
So no BSing allowed. You're looking for real analysis there. What about directly asking the AI about its own reasoning? Is that possible?
Definitely. That's called cross-examining the model. Since we're talking about an AI that actually has this belief representation, we can ask it, hey, why did you ask that question? What do you think the user believes? How certain are you? And a truly epistemically aligned AI, it should be able to explain what it's doing in a way that makes sense.
So treat the AI like a witness on a stand, grill it a little bit, and the ultimate test, I guess, is seeing how it performs in the real world.
Exactly. Deployment audit, they call it. Actually observing the AI in realistic settings, even if it's just experts monitoring its interactions, that's crucial for making sure it's genuinely behaving as it should. So by using all of these different evaluation strategies, you can get a much better sense of whether the AI is really truly embodying good reasoning or if it's just putting on a good show.
This whole approach to evaluation is so thorough, it's really impressive. You're not just accepting the AI's answers at face value, you're digging deep. Okay, so let's say we've actually managed to create this super AI that can reason thoughtfully, engage in helpful dialogue and all that. Where can this technology actually make a difference in the real world? What are the applications?
Oh, the potential applications. Huge. Our source goes into a whole bunch of areas where epistemic AI could be super valuable.
Let's start with governance and public deliberation. How could AI help us make better decisions as a society? That's a big one.
Imagine this. You're using AI as a neutral facilitator in, public discussions, town hall meetings, citizen panels, you name it. It's there to listen to all the different viewpoints, ask clarifying questions, maybe even point out hidden assumptions that people are making, and overall just help people understand each other's reasoning better.
So instead of everyone just shouting their opinions, You've got an AI helping to make it a more reasoned, productive discussion.
Exactly. Think about a debate over a new local policy, right? The AI could gently question both sides, asking about their reasoning, the evidence they're using, and ideally lead to a more informed and hopefully more agreeable outcome. You could even use AI for gathering public input online, getting citizens involved in these thoughtful dialogues about policy ideas. And that can give policymakers, a much better sense of what people actually think and why.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds incredibly useful. Okay, so that's at the societal level, but how could this kind of AI help individuals with their own personal choices and decisions?
That's where ethics consulting and personal decision support come in. Picture this, an AI that's like a reasoning coach. It helps you clarify your own values when you're facing a tough decision. And instead of telling you what to do, it uses those questioning techniques we've been talking about to guide you to reflect on yourself. So let's say you're struggling with a really difficult choice. You could talk it through with this AI, and it would ask you questions to help you figure out your priorities, to understand the different implications of each choice. You could even use it for training purposes, like to help people think through ethical dilemmas.
So it's like a digital guide for, like, moral reasoning. That's pretty cool. I think that's a good place to leave it for now. A lot for our listeners to think about.